our top story is the extension and the fact that it was the Teamsters that got it through late Sunday evening. Todd Maiden joins us now to talk about the story. Todd, how's it going?
Good. Thanks for having me.
So when people woke up this morning, this is probably not the news that they were expecting at this point. What essentially happened, and what does Yellow have in terms of how they're moving forward?
Yeah, so for months, the two parties couldn't come to terms on a change of operations that Yellow had said that was vital to its survival. It would streamline the way it does business, allow it to compete a little bit better in the market, and certainly improve its cost structure. Low on cash, it went to Central States a month ago, asking to defer $50 million in health and welfare and pension payments. Central States said no at the time. Yellow missed their July 15 payment. So Teamsters, who would have been without coverage, health coverage yesterday, threatened to strike today. And then late yesterday, Central States, I guess with involvement from the Teamsters and even company representatives, kind of hatched out an agreement to give Yellow a 30-day extension. They're expected to make the payment in 2 weeks, but so they have another month there now.
And I guess on that is that I know they missed one $50 million payment. So is this a second basically missed, totaling the $100 million? I know a lot of the talk's been around their liquidity position at around $100 million. It would basically wipe that out, right?
So, all right. The Teamsters release last night said that they missed a July 15 payment for $50 million. I checked with company officials yesterday. All along, I think that may have been a misprint, because all along it said that they wanted to defer 2 months of payments equaling $50 million, one due July 15, which they missed, the other due August 15. The company said it was $25 million that they're actually delinquent on. So, and to your point, the $100 million, a June 30 filing with the SEC showed that they had in excess of $100 million in cash. Not sure what the liquidity position was. But you're right. I mean, there's not much breathing room here. One interesting part of yesterday's announcement is that the Yellow company officials and the Teamsters negotiating committee began meeting last night regarding the collective bargaining agreement. So, and I know that the Teamsters they resume talks with UPS tomorrow. So I don't know if we could get something in short order here. It's a possibility. I don't know that Central States, after saying no, you're not allowed to defer this payment for a month, and then at the last minute, literally hours before a strike, gave them a 30-day extension. There might be some hope there that the two parties, after all, aren't that far apart on this change of operations and what they want in the next 5-year collective bargaining agreement.
It's certainly an interesting situation in the fact that obviously the Yellow had gone and asked for an extension. Central States said no. They went to the courts to try and stop or have an injunction against a strike and got a no there as well. And then the Teamsters make this sort of bold move, even after they've said, of course, or at least one of the representatives said that basically no job is better than having a job at Yellow at this particular point. But just kind of, I'm not necessarily hypothesizing here, but I mean, obviously the reason that the Teamsters go in is they've got to save jobs, at least at some point. Is that the reason for this last minute kind of Hail Mary, if you will, to try and keep these 22,000 Yellow jobs?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, I think it really didn't get real for this company since really 2009. I mean, it's been here. It was in here 2009, 11, 2014, 2020 with that $700 million loan kind of last minute, when it actually had deferred payments to Central States a month or two prior. It got that $700 million loan shortly after the pandemic's onset. So I think everybody kind of involved is used to this company getting a last minute, 11th hour lifeline. And that I don't think that this is that, but it's certainly some breathing room to potentially get a contract done. And I think it got, the situation probably got pretty real for employees, realizing that, all right, we strike on Monday. That means there's, it's not just health insurance. We're going to have missed paychecks, et cetera. So I'm sure there was some pressure from employees on the Teamsters leadership to are you sure there's nothing you can do to save this company? And then to your point, I mean, Teamsters membership for decades now, really since deregulation, has been on the decline. So I know when you look at, I think it's 1.3 million Teamsters and then 340,000 are at UPS. This is not the biggest piece of that pie, but it's still an integral piece and potentially an area where they'd like to expand at some point.
Yeah, and I mean to that, I mean you look at kind of what the Yellow representative said in the court on Friday. I mean, talking about if there's a strike, the company's good as gone. I mean, just you kind of mentioned it. It kind of you start when you hear that as an employee, it kind of puts pressure on. They're putting pressure on Teamsters leadership because they don't want to miss those. I mean, does this basically does Teamsters leadership kind of lose a little power in this situation because they realize that, hey, if the company goes under, we won't have jobs, and now the employees are going to be pushing back against that union leadership?
Yeah, I think so. There was a rally on Saturday in Atlanta it was really for UPS Teamsters, but the first 6 minutes of the conversation, Sean O'Brien talked about Yellow and how the company was in a fight for its life, how they were going to remain, strong against company leadership and do the right thing for employees. But I think that's. I don't know that some Teamsters are probably looking at it as. I did hear that some wanted to strike and they were done, but. I think as it got more and more real, Sean O'Brien at that rally, he said he was adamant that he was going to help these 22,000 Teamsters find positions elsewhere. But I think when you start to do the math throughout the LTL industry, and there are not many union carriers to begin with, and then also a lot of these facilities are kind of end of line sites in small regions of the country, and there aren't Teamster jobs there. There aren't union jobs there. Big cities may have been easier to do, but I don't know if he thought about how many of those 22,000 he could ultimately place, and that may have been a catalyst to get everybody to the table as well.
Todd, looking at what could have happened today, obviously it's a bit of a surprise when people woke up this morning and found out that Yellow was indeed not perhaps in bankruptcy and there was not going to be a strike. That said, looking at what could have happened, obviously there were some players that were already saying we're going to pull our freight from Yellow because we're just afraid of what's possibly going to happen. A lot of people said it. Nobody really committed to it. I think Uber Freight did, in fact, say that they were pulling theirs. Are people getting ready, as far as you've heard, in terms of what seems like an inevitability at some point, unless Yellow somehow turns things around? And obviously, with making those payments, they're going to have to have revenue. They're going to have to move freight in order to continue to stay alive as a company. Basically, are we looking at sharks in the water at this point?
Oh yeah, and I think they have been for a few months now. As the headlines heated up, I mean, this is going to be an interesting. So if they do get a deal done, the company is there for its second quarter earnings report, which would be early August. It's going to be interesting to see what actually occurred in June. The cash burn has to have been terrible. The tonnage declines were mid-teens on top of mid-teens from the prior year. So mid-teens year over year, mid-teens year over year the prior year. So over a third of its network down. That only accelerated. I don't think that all of a sudden this announcement, certainly without a deal from the Teamsters, if they get a collective bargaining in place, you'll see some customers start to trickle back in. But where they are right now, yeah, I mean, you spent the better part of last week prepping for this strike at your facilities. You weren't making pickups in a lot of areas, just delivering what you had in the network. So the spigot will not be turned back on in short order. And I don't think any shipper out there today or intermediary all of a sudden puts them back on their broker board or starts sending freight that way. They're going to want to see a deal done. with Teamsters. And even then, it's going to take a while to get comfortable and unwind what they've done over the last couple of weeks.
Well, it's going to be a very interesting situation over the course of the next 30 days. Todd, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.